opportunity to honor teachers, classified staff, pro-tech staff, our administrators. It's a really great time of celebration. And I know, Mike, you said that you could be there. So if there's any other board members that are able to attend, please let me know. Just a reminder, we are in the process of the interim superintendent. Wanted to just put this on a slide as an update. The screening committee, we have several candidates, my understanding is, that have applied. The screening panel meets on the 16th to review the applications. During that process, we do have, you guys got together during the work session to put together what your priorities were and what was important to you as a board for the superintendent. And Lexi Haberman used that feedback because, she was at the work study session also, and use that feedback to put together kind of a rating scale for the multi-stakeholder group that will come together to help screen the applications on May 16th. And Tasha and Cindy will be the two board members that will be on the screening committee and also part of the interviews. And so after those are screened, there'll be 3 candidates from that pool that will be recommended to go on to the interviews with the various stakeholder groups. We'll have a parent-student group, a teacher classified group, and then administrator with 2 board members group. So there'll be 3 candidates and that will rotate through those 3 groups for the interviews. And like all of our interview processes, every single person who attends the interview will have a chance to write down their strengths and stretches, as well as a recommendation of the 3 candidates, who their top 2 candidates are. That information will be given to Tasha and Cindy, and Tasha, Cindy, and Lexi will look through all of that feedback. And then they'll make the decision on who the top 2 candidates will be that move forward to the interviews with just the board. And although Lexi is glad to be there with you as well, just as a consistent member, to have an interview with the board on Friday. And all of those timelines have been shared with candidates, so they know ahead of time that that's a possibility to interview on Thursday and then potentially get on Friday. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Ginger. Let's see. So that takes us now into business. And first item up, A, curriculum adoption for EHS reading list.
And Jen Kuntz is up with our Director of Teaching and Learning and has some great curricular adoptions to bring before you tonight.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight to request adoption of some different curricular areas. And I also have some teachers here to help present. And we've got one in person, Nick Meisterik, so he'll be here. And then it looks like we do actually have Lorraine Barlow and Brittany Weiler and Eric Wickwire on Zoom. So they'll also jump in on their content areas. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And a big thank you to all of them, because this is the 3rd evening event in the last couple of weeks they've had to attend to put these materials forward that they're very excited about. So the contents areas being proposed for adoption this year are all of these ones that you see here. The first one, consumer family issues, the comprehensive sexual health ed component, which the materials we're suggesting is Flash. We are going to postpone that one until the June 14th meeting, partially because there's just so much here that even at the community input session and the IMC meeting, it took over an hour to present these materials and then have even just a little bit of conversation about them. So in order to keep it a little bit more brief tonight here, and also because naturally comprehensive sexual health ed is a little bit more of a sensitive topic that maybe a little bit more layer of due diligence. So we wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you guys about that Flash curriculum in a study session and and get it to you so you can preview it and really get in there and see what's there before you have to vote on it. So I think it works well to put it into the June meeting. So tonight we're just looking at some reading books for the high school English department. And so all of these materials are high school materials, with the exception of Spanish 1, which is also taught at the middle school. We're looking at an Intro to Poli-Sci book for a college and high school course, and then Spanish 1 through 4 materials and French materials. So I also wanted to mention every year when I do this adoption speech, I kind of talk about this, but with new board members, I do think it's important just to recognize that we do have on our website an instructional materials area that goes through what our adoption process is, who are sitting members of the Instructional Materials Committee, which is a committee that is put together per policy. And then at the bottom, there are links where you can click on different grade bands to see what are the materials that we have in place that are currently adopted. So that is there on the website. And this is our adoption cycle for different content areas. And I like to highlight this for a couple of different reasons. Before a couple of years ago, we weren't on an adoption cycle, which just meant that we sort of adopt different content areas at different grade bands, sort of haphazardly and where the greatest need might arise. But it caused a few different problems. It caused budgeting problems. It caused vertical alignment problems because we might have the middle school adopt one content area while elementary and high school were not adopting that content area. So it didn't provide opportunity for those vertical conversations with teachers of those content areas. And then this also provides a nice ensured way that you as the board get to review all of our materials on a regular basis, because you can see where we're going to be talking about them coming up. And of course, we can talk about them at any point, but this provides a schedule for when you can anticipate that we're looking at certain content areas and whether or not our materials fit our current need. So last year was the first community input session we had as part of the adoption process. It is not in either the policy or procedure for curriculum adoption, but we thought that it's an important piece of the adoption process to start to allow sort of a formal way for community and parents to come hear about what are the materials we're talking about adopting, be able to ask questions, be able to look through the materials themselves. And of course, the public can do that at any time with our materials. They just have to contact the school or the district office, and we are happy to open up any of our materials that we use in Ellensburg School District. But this provides a communication piece and an avenue for, we're looking at adopting these materials. If you would like to come to the community input session, and I know probably more people would come if their lives weren't so full and busy. And so I recognize that it shouldn't be the only way that we get feedback on our materials, but it's certainly, I think, an important way. And so the feedback forms from that session for these materials, including the flash material, because we did present them at those meetings, even though we're not asking for adoption tonight on that, is linked to on the feedback form. So you guys should have that feedback. But in a nutshell, without the comments, this just gives, oh, and then the Instructional Materials Committee, sorry. The Instructional Materials Committee is a committee that is put together per policy, that is a multi-stakeholder committee that is responsible to review the materials before they come to you. You guys are obviously the deciding factor on whether or not we adopt, but it goes through the Instructional Materials Committee first. The Instructional Materials Committee is also there if there's ever a citizen complaint about any of our materials in district. But again, that ultimately comes to you guys to make those final decisions. So the Instructional Materials Committee, with the items that we're looking at tonight, were unanimously, yes, support these materials. So we are going to start with the EHS reading list. And this list consists of, so the whole list that's linked to there for you, most of those have already been formally adopted. And actually, I believe a couple of them that we might be adopting tonight that we've had were adopted in the past, but we don't have formal record of that unless we went back and dug through stuff. So they've been using them in lit circles and in small groups in the high school, and they want flexibility to be able to use those in a whole group instructional way. So those need to be formally adopted by the board in order to do that. So many of the books that you'll see tonight have already been in our book rooms and have already been in use, but we would like flexibility to use them with whole group. And then additionally, we're adding some new books to the list to balance out representation in our book rooms. So we do have Brittany Weiler and Lorraine Barlow that are here to help present. If they can be unmuted, they're on Zoom. Okay, perfect. And then, so these are the books that we've already had in our book room, but that they'd like flexibility to use whole group if and when they thought that that was a good instructional move. Perfect. You guys can pop in and tell me when to click next.
I'm not sure if there are any questions that people, I mean, I'm fine with next on some of those unless there are questions about them, or if the board wants us to add anything, to add any information to any of the novels that we're proposing.
Lorraine, do you want to give a quick synopsis of the three here that are new that you have slides for?
Yes.
Perfect.
So the first one is The Beat Queen, and this is a novel that I am proposing for AP Literature, and it was written by Louise Erdrich, who is, she herself is an Indigenous author, and this particular novel is very poetic in its language, and it's beautifully written, but it also portrays Indigenous people in a way that is a really good representation of characters, non-stereotypical and realistic, and the characters are quirky and unique. And the way the story begins, it starts with two siblings who come to North Dakota during the Great Depression. And the opening of the story has been used in an AP timed right prompt. So a lot of students have read that as part of the timed right prompt, and then are interested in the novel itself because of the way it opens. So the two main characters, or at least at the beginning, Carl and Mary, are very distinct from one another. Mary is described as short, practical, and ordinary, like her name, and she's going to be like that for her whole life. And then Carl is thin and delicate. His skin is soft. His mouth is kind of sweet and girlish, and they react to their situations quite differently. And they end up having an experience that they react to completely differently, which causes Mary to run toward the relatives in the town, and Carl, sorry, to run away from the relatives back toward the train, and they're separated. But then the novel itself takes place over 40 years and introduces other characters, and it really deals with their lives and the lives of the other characters in a really honest, human way. And students really respond to it. And there are different students who can relate to different characters on multiple levels. It also, yeah, I can see the slide. It aligns with the power standards that the district has set forth. It also aligns with the AP standards, which are really similar but somewhat more rigorous. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, Erdrich herself is a really prolific writer, and this novel is actually one of, it can be read by itself, but it also is kind of a set of a 4-part series of novels about similar characters. And then The Marrow Thieves is a newer novel than The Beat Queen. And we were proposing this primarily for freshmen. And it's a dystopian novel that is set in the future, and it takes place in Canada. The author is also Canadian, and it is the story of a group of Indigenous youth who are trying to escape being sent to boarding schools, essentially, and survive on their own and not be sent back. And in this dystopian future, they are being recruited, quote unquote, to be taken to boarding schools where their bone marrow is harvested so that white people can use the bone marrow to be able to dream again, because they've lost that ability to be able to dream. And then the author is Sherry Dimeline, and she is Métis or Métis, depending on if you're using the French or English pronunciation. But she's won multiple awards, and for this novel in particular, but has won other awards as well. And she has, she's still writing. She coordinates the annual Indigenous Writers Gathering. And I think that one of the comments when we had the community input for this novel was that somebody thought that it was, I can't remember if they thought maybe it was anti-white, or maybe because of the way I talked about the white people versus the Indigenous people, that was the way it came across. But that's certainly not the way we teach it, and that's not the ideology of the novel. It's more about what it means to try to focus on humanity versus dehumanization, and also a way to look at our history, the history in Canada, within the US, within Australia, etc., of boarding schools and stripping people of their identities and their cultures. And so it's set in the future, but then it also addresses issues of the past, of boarding schools, and of our own history, but in a way that's not saying, oh, white people are bad, but this is something that happened in our history that was a bad thing. Not that the people who did it were bad, or anybody who has ever participated in something like this is bad, but this is a danger that could happen in any culture. And so a reminder of the past, that if people are dehumanized, this is an effect of that dehumanization. And then also looking at the effects of this particular event in our history and the current effects on people that it continues to have today. And it's a way to look at those effects through a fictional telling of events and stories that students relate to outside of just a historical narrative. So we're looking at connections, literary connections, and there are a lot of different ways that students can connect with this, as far as bringing in Common Core standards and literary terminology, assignments that could accompany the reading. I mean, it lends itself well to all kinds of ways to structure connections to it, and connections to language, to literary assignments, as well as cultural, historical assignments. And we also talked to Wickwire about this, and then the next novel that we're proposing as well, about some collaboration on historical studies and primary documents and things like that for looking at this in literature classes and history classes. So yeah, next slide. And so this is the connection specifically with its historical context and how we can look at the Common Core standards for literature, but then also how those connect with the standards for history and social studies with looking at primary documents, both historical documents, but also contemporary documents and cases of civil rights, and connecting those to the fiction in the novel and the historical accuracy as well of things that have actually happened. And then I think that, yeah, the next slide is the WIDA standards. And so those are the standards for students who don't speak English as their primary language. And so this is also a novel that students, it has been, when I've used it as a literature circles novel, it has a high interest level. And it also has a lot of connections with the WIDA standards for multi-language learners. And then we had contemporary connections. So some of the contemporary articles that have come out recently about mass graves being uncovered at a lot of the boarding schools, not only in Canada, but also in the United States, where Indigenous children were sent away to boarding schools and then the parents didn't ever know what had happened to them. So there's, you know, some evidence now of what has happened and maybe some healing. And so students would be able to look at some of those contemporary articles that have come out and connect those to the novel as well. And then also text connections to other novels that we read in the English classes as well, that could either, this novel could either be read in accompaniment with those, or, you know, we always offer an alternative reading. If students are opposed to a reading, we have something that they could read instead. So it could also be offered as an alternative to some of our other texts in English classes. And then the third novel that we are proposing as a new novel is George Takei's graphic memoir of his family's time in a Japanese internment camp. And it's called They Called Us Enemy. So it's his memoir. And it also, of course, has to do with history. And it has, again, a lot of historical connections and could be paired with, you know, we could collaborate with history teachers and look at primary documents, but it's also told, especially at the beginning, from a child's perspective. Takei was 5 years old when he first went to the camps. So he's telling the story from that perspective, and his parents sort of hid the actual experience from their children. So he didn't have the adult perspective of what was really happening in the camps and didn't have the understanding that the adults had of what was happening. So some of the historical connections are looking at the executive order in 1942, or looking at the civil rights legislature that was put into place in 1988, or the reparations that were made in the 1990s, et cetera. But there are a lot of laws that connect to this. And then even after that, I mean, it's still ongoing. There were some laws that were executive orders that were signed when Trump was president. And then when, you know, now when Biden is president, that can be looked at too, in connection with this as well, kind of a connection from the past to the present with similar, at least thematic links as far as ancestry and citizenship, etc. And again, not trying to look at it as something that people did that was bad, but things that can happen that maybe don't seem bad at the time, but that a country can be compelled to do, or that can happen, that historically then is looked at as, oh, oops, that was bad. But it's not like the people doing it were, evil people. It's just a bad thing that was done historically and is a lesson for us in history. So this is what I was talking about in 1988. So one part of this memoir is that Takei was one of the people who spoke out and was one of the people to be a witness for the Civil Liberties Act in 1988. And he also, in his memoir, kind of talks about the difficulties he had with coming to terms with his father not telling him the truth at the time. It's also, these are just a lot of the awards that the memoir has won. And then a lot of the issues, you know, some but not all, that could be discussed in class discussions, in journals, etc., when reading this. And then it also aligns with, again, just like the other ones, with our standards, especially with the standards that, you know, we've identified as a district as being priority standards for students. And it also aligns well, again, with WIDA standards, which are those standards for multi-language learners in the district. And then again, as they, they call this enemy, the marrow thieves, it can also be paired with or offered as alternatives to other texts that we have. And so as a graphic novel, you know, it could be taught at different levels. So we teach the Crucible junior year, but this is one that could also be paired with the Crucible because it links to history, just as the Crucible does, but then the Crucible also connects to McCarthyism and witch hunts and accusations that are unfounded. So it really has a lot of connections with other pieces of literature too, but it can also be paired with Ceremony, which is an AP novel. And I know just this last week, my AP class wanted to read this particular text as well. And then again, contemporary connections. So there are proposals for some of the internment camp sites having wind farms or other things placed on those historical sites. And so there are people who are protesting about that because they want those sites to be changed and not have that history of it being used as internment camp area erased.
So thank you, Lorraine. This next slide is just about cost for each of the content areas. I don't know that we're going to have to spend any because we already have some of this or it's already been budgeted for, but we may have to spend a few $100s over the course of next year just to flesh out the book rooms and ensure that they have enough books for every class that might be teaching these texts to use at the same time. But no anticipated cost at this time. And I don't know if you want to vote per content area or at the end of all of this.
Probably per content area, but
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, I didn't see it as an action item. I only saw it as a public item.
And do you guys have any questions for Lorraine or Brittany, who's also on Zoom, for any of those texts? Well, that's getting
Forward, this is our chance. So if you have any discussion or questions about the English, the literature being proposed tonight, well, Tasha helps us out and looks something up. Just 1 second, Jen.
no, it's all right.
This isn't a question, but I'll just say these seem like really thoughtful choices and also ones that have very contemporary significance for students. And so thank you for all the work that you've put into these recommendations.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I have to credit the English department entirely, but yes.
And you said this was for the 11th and 12th grades? Sure.
No, some of them potentially could be used as low as the freshman level.
Okay.
Where is Matt when we need him?
Oh, Brittany is wanting to be unmuted. She might want to correct me that maybe they're not using them at freshman level.
Hi, sorry, no, I didn't want to make a correction on that. I just wanted to add that for the texts that we haven't covered yet, Jen, do you have the documents that I emailed you earlier?
All the way back there. Oops, skipped it.
Okay. So those are all texts that we have already been used as supplementary texts that we just want to bring into whole classroom texts. Because so far, a lot of our texts that do focus on diverse perspectives are texts that are used in small group work or as supplemental texts instead of as core curriculum texts. So we just want the opportunity to unmarginalize our books that bring in diverse perspectives, if that makes sense. So that's what those are. Like Jen already said, they're texts that we've already been using in the classroom. It's just that they haven't been in our core menu of options. They've been in small groups only. That's all.
Thank you, Brittany.
Okay, so board, it looks like we can go ahead. So I would entertain a motion on curriculum adoption for EHS reading list.
I'll move to approve the proposed adoption of the EHS reading list.
I'll second.
All right, Cindy has moved that we adopt the curriculum for EHS reading list. Tasha has second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, EHS reading list has been approved. Go ahead and continue, Jen.
All right, so the next content area is, or the text, which I actually have here. I will bring it up here once Eric starts talking, but is for a poli-sci course, and it's American Government and Politics Today, and it's for a college and the high school course. And I'm just gonna let Eric be unmuted so that he can present his slides here, and I'm gonna run this over to you guys.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jen, for everything that you've done in this process. I think the system that we have here in Ellensburg School District is strong and has some great rigor and wonderful opportunities for community input. And so also thanks for keeping things moving through this process, as it's very important for our kids and our teachers to gain these teaching materials. So first off, I'd like to say that college and the high school is just a wonderful opportunity for kids and parents, teachers, and our whole school district. It keeps kids and their FTE on our campus that are interested in college and gives them an opportunity to get jump started earning credits. Personally, I think it's better than AP and Running Start for a majority of the kids that are seeking those opportunities due to various factors, like having the support of a high school instructor and not having to just roll the dice and gamble to see if you get college credit or not. This is my fourth college and the high school course over the last decade. And at EHS, currently under my leadership, we do college and the high school sociology in the place of current world affairs. That's in its third year. Kids that want to take that course get credit for their current world affairs class and also 5 college credits through Central for Soc 101. This new opportunity would give kids the opportunity to earn 5 more credits for a total of 10 in their senior year in my high school classroom. under the title of Introduction to Political Science, and that would take the place of our civics requirements. So these are required credits that the kids have to take for civics and current world affairs that they can now gain 10 college credits for in the high school setting. So it's a wonderful opportunity. I have been approved both through Central Washington University and Eastern Washington University for this course. And how that all works, in case the board doesn't know, is that, you know, you have to go through an application process that's pretty rigorous depending upon what the department is. And then I go to trainings in June mostly. And what I'm going to do is just sort of go to both trainings and see which opportunity I think is better for our kids. Different colleges handle things differently, and then within them, different departments have more restrictions or greater liberties for instructors. And so I'm going to just go to both trainings to see what's best for our kids. So both of the colleges require a college level textbook, which the one that I'm putting in front of the board tonight is. Eastern Washington University uses this for their Intro to Political Science course, and it is well liked by their professors and their students. And within the realm of political science today and civics and government, and you know, that says a lot. That speaks a lot on its own. Other things about the text that are great, it's a 2022 edition, so it's current. And if we're going to do, you know, a 6-year adoption cycle, you know, there's new court cases and new laws that come up every, you know, daily or every year or month. So it's good that it's current. You got to balance a lot of things when dealing with the realm of political science or civics. There's your various different, I mean, basically it's a government course that looks at the structure of government. And also you bring in, you know, the different political parties and what they think about different things. You've got to have a text that's readable, but college level, but also is comprehensive, yet relatively easy to understand and simple for kids, but has a certain level of depth as well. And in this realm with, you know, a couple hundred years of historical context, that's a lot to contain. The text does that. And it's a very sensible organization for me as an instructor to follow. And I think it's digestible for kids. Let's do the next one, Jen, you're on it. All right, so like I said earlier, we're talking about government, we're talking about politics, and we're also talking about civics. And, you know, to the layman or somebody who's not, you know, teaching this realm or studying it deeply, you're like, what's the difference, right? Well, they're similar, yet they're different, right? So the government is just the structure of government itself, the kind of the bones of our Constitution and laws. You know, political science, politics is more about different viewpoints on that within our established parties. And civics is more like where we as citizens fit and what we can do to impact change that we see necessary within the system. And so I really like the text as far as its ability to do those things. Probably most importantly is that the text is just strongly objective in discussing every issue that it brings up. And everybody knows how politically loaded our world is today and how divided our society is. And so after, I don't know, I think this is like my 18th or 19th year of teaching current world affairs and civics. And it's more important than ever that, you know, we create an environment that is neutral and objective for kids to feel welcome, to come in and look at things in an open-minded way so they can figure out and understand the world for themselves. And so I think the text does a phenomenal job on that, better than anything else that I've seen. So let's see. or now that I look at my slides, I think I got my years wrong, but yeah, maybe it's 21 years I've been doing this stuff, but anyway, doesn't matter. So I've gone through the text and I drew up various different controversial figures and issues and combed through it. And it's purely factual. There's no judgment really on anything. And the fact that 7 of the members on the instructional materials adoption committee voted for it and none opposed to it after I read a few samples validates that, along with my professional judgment. To dovetail in with what Elaine said, I think we looked at a piece on the Japanese internment or maybe the Chinese Exclusion Act, which are historical issues. So it brings some context as well. But, those things are just the straight story of what happened. Anyway, I think that sort of covers that piece. As far as the cost goes, the digital access, which I'm not arguing for, or I guess advocating for, I should say tonight, is $3,000 a year for 2 sections. So we currently have like 50 kids that want to take it next year. Those numbers vary. So, if we figure that there's maybe up to 60 kids that'll end up in the 2 sections, we're looking at about $3,000 a year in cost versus a hard copy textbook, which I prefer and I'm promoting here, is $6,800 for 60 students. And then we get to use those for 6 years until our next turn in the adoption cycle. Highly recommend the hard copy text. Money matters, and that's not the first reason that I would argue, but it's cheaper. Those of us in education today, especially if you're a teacher or working with kids, we're just overloaded with digital requirements. Now we need to use a computer to go to the bathroom, not speaking critically, just factually. So kids have hours and hours and hours of screen time. And after COVID and online learning, they overwhelmingly tell me that they're just like so happy to have a textbook in front of them over digital resources. As far as from a teacher's perspective, digital copies are really cumbersome. They're difficult to maneuver, even for kids who are experts from video games and cell phones. And it's easier to access, less clutter, gives them a break from screens. And, the buzzword of today, of course, is equity. And so it'd be easy to make an equity argument as well. We have kids that don't have high-speed internet access. And so, they can take a textbook home and read the textbook and learn from it as a basis for our conversations in class. Next slide, please. Looks like that's the end. I'm happy to honor any questions that you have.
Board, any questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Eric.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
So board, if we're going to continue with this, I would entertain a motion for adoption for political science textbook, or adoption of curriculum for political science.
I move that we adopt the proposed curriculum for political science textbook.
I'll second.
Jonathan has moved that we adopt the curriculum for political science, and Cindy has seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Curriculum for political science has passed.
Perfect. Thank you, board.
Thanks,
And thank you, Eric.
Absolutely.
That moves us on to the last one for today, which is our world languages adoption. And for that, I'm going to invite Nick Meisterk up here to present.
Board, Superintendent Habiter, and our student council representatives. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm here representing the World Language Department, which currently consists of Japanese and Spanish. Unfortunately, we're losing our Japanese teacher, which is one of the reasons why we are looking at getting curriculum for French, which is going to be offered next year. We vetted quite a few different companies to see what they had to offer. And the one that we all agreed upon was from Vista Higher Learning, the Encuentros. We're looking at Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4, and then French 1 and 2. I'm finishing up my 19th year teaching. And in that time, we have never formally adopted any curriculum for the world languages. And so this is one of the reasons why we had this chance now while it was our turn. And so we spent the time, we were diligent in how we went about it. And even before I got here, we didn't have some formal curriculum. And so up there, the cohesive program, we're looking at trying to scaffold, especially that we offer one of the few programs up at the high school that offer high school credit at the middle school. And so we want to make sure that everything was scaffolded from working at the middle school level as they progressed through the high school. And then one of the main tenets of the text was the diversity and equal treatment of multiple Spanish-speaking countries, including cultural and linguistic similarities and differences, something that isn't always covered, but something that is important to us, especially with ACTFL standards as the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Language, which we are members and which we kind of adhere to their standards. And then we went back and forth on how we wanted to operate, whether we wanted to go with a digital only or print only. And we came to a conclusion that a mezcla of those two were going to be the best. And so that's what we're going with in order to facilitate students that might be gone for extended reasons, but also to make sure, just like Mr. Wickwire was saying earlier, the importance of removing screen time because they're just inundated with that throughout the course of the day. And then back to buzzwords, multi-tier system of support. Okay. So at the Encuentros, we're looking at Spanish 1 through 4. And it received the 7 votes for adopting it from the curriculum committee. There's rubrics if you'd like to see them. Let's see. All good things there. Are there any questions on the Spanish component of it? Okay. All right. And then the accord from French. And one of the cool things about this opportunity is that we had 80 students register for French classes at the high school. So we're going to be able to offer that as something new, but also something that's valid in terms of broadening the horizons of students here in Ellensburg to see the world through the classroom. And another one of the reasons why we went with Vista is that both French and Spanish are pretty similar in terms of the way their textbooks are run. And so we're able to kind of have a seamless transition for students that are entering into the French realm or going forward with the Spanish as well. And so we're asking for a little under 27,000 to work with our French and Spanish students. And we're looking at, like I said, 80 students in terms of enrollment for French 1, 120 for Spanish 1, about 120 for Spanish 2, and then 40 plus for Spanish 3, 4, and 5. So this number is dealing with a whole of our world language department. And like I said, this is the first time that we've formally asked for money in this capacity in over 2 decades.
Can I ask a question about the French
Yes.
curriculum? So you emphasized in the Spanish curriculum that there's connections between like different forms of Spanish being spoken in different parts of the world, et cetera. Is that also true in the French curriculum? Is there an emphasis on the like French colonial diaspora kind of, well, not diaspora, but French colonial range and like French speaking countries in Africa and.
I'm not
the
sure,
Caribbean?
with the Quebecois, positive on that. I'm guessing so just because of the fact that the Spanish goes into native languages like Nahuatl in Mexico as well. So I think that it does, but I'll have to get back to you on that, or I'll make sure we get back to you on that.
Yeah, I was just curious because I think there's a lot more emphasis in that and in the Spanish sort of
Mhm.
teaching than in French teaching yet, but I was wondering. Thank
Very
you.
good question. I'll follow up with you on that.
Board, any other questions? Yeah.
Before we do this adoption, I just have a comment. Thank you to our Director of Teaching and Learning who does have an adoption cycle that is now adopted, and that we do have formalized this, as I think Mr. Magister just said, 20 plus years before we have supported our necessary foreign language in our high school. So thank you for that. And thank you for the policy of that was followed in getting those community members and teachers and everyone there outside of regular hours to review and go through all of these curriculum choices.
All right, board. If there's no more questions or discussion, I would entertain a motion for adoption of curriculum adoption for world languages.
I move to adopt the proposed curriculum for world languages.
I second.
Cindy has moved that we adopt the curriculum for world languages, and Jonathan has seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Curriculum for world languages has been approved.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the curriculum adoption.
Thank you to all of the committees that put a lot of time and effort into this process. And thank you, Jen, for your impeccable organization of this process and implementing it.
Thank you, Jen, and all the teachers that presented tonight. That takes us on to item D, resolution 9523, waiver from state high school requirements for big picture at Ellensburg Learning Center.
Yes, and this is an action item, and Rhonda Schmidt is here to tell us more about this waiver.
So I came to you at the end of March board meeting to request that we adopt the big picture competencies to serve as the graduation requirements for the big picture program at the Ellensburg Learning Center. And as a follow-up to that, I need to submit an application to the State Board of Education for State Board of Education approval for a waiver of the credit-based graduation requirements to be substituted by our competencies. And so I'm requesting that the board issue a resolution supporting this change to a competency-based graduation that I can submit to the State Board of Education. And this is a required part of my application to the State Board of Education. So I believe that's included in the board docs. And so I guess I'm not sure. I don't think I have anything really new to add to it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
As a reminder, board, this was covered by Rhonda also at the Student Centered Learning Committee. And she has gone over the competencies and shared with us the mastery-based transcript, and that is working to a consortium that has a history and a list on the website of secondary schools and different places that students can take this transcript. Two, this is also something the State Board of Education has talked about extensively, and the legislature is funding other districts around us to pursue mastery-based learning and that sort of thing. Just as a reminder of all of the work that you've brought to us before. And
thank you. And yeah, and this is one of the nice parts about being part of the big picture community in our state is that they're pretty active in that mastery based instruction working group for OSPI.
Board, do you have any questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion On resolution 9523, waiver from state high school requirements for big picture at Ellensburg Learning Center.
I move that we approve resolution 9523.
I second.
Tasha has moved that we approve, thank you, approved resolution 9523. Jonathan has seconded. I will call a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, resolution 9523 passed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda.
All right, that takes us into policy. First up, item A. Second reading for policy 5254, staff expression.
Yes, and anytime it's a second reading, it means that, we looked at this policy at the second board meeting in April. And I am recommending that we remove this item from this meeting, from the agenda, just so we have more time for some staff dialogue around this policy. And then we can bring it back probably in June to give you the feedback from some of that dialogue, and then see if that's a policy that the board would want to adopt, and share with you what that feedback was. So it's an action item to remove it.
Ginger, can you clarify, was this a Mazda was this a model WASDA
Yes,
policy?
this was a model WASDA policy, and it's a discretionary one. It has some similarities, as I shared with you in an email today, to our civility policy 5282. And in talking with Lexi is pretty, the policy and procedure is pretty similar to what we do in instances where there's a concern or, something that we need to look at around staff expression. I appreciate the feedback we got. I think it's necessary to have further dialogue around this. I am currently thinking about putting together a committee that has membership from all of the, since it's a staff expression, from all of our different employee groups. I think it's really good opportunity for us to have dialogue around where do we stand as staff members and as a district around staff expression, especially around social media. I know during the WASDA conference, Mike and I went to the law conference, and there was a lot of discussion around First Amendment and staff expression, and what can a district do to have common values and common process around what would be considered appropriate or not appropriate, especially with the use of staff with social media. So I'm looking forward to this as really being an opportunity for us to have a good discussion around this topic.
Board, this is a discussion I'm thankful for that we're going to have, because this is why we have first and second readings, and we don't just have first readings. Yep. I know board agendas aren't, well, it's like the most exciting thing people can read, if we're honest. It really is. Thank you for doing that. This has been a huge discussion. It's a big discussion in workplaces all over, in the absence of a policy and a procedure that is tending to be what's getting everybody into murky waters. And if there are lines of sights that we can work together on in order to, in this contemporary society where we do have social media presence, I think clarity is kindness. But board cognizant that all employees, all students, this is specifically to do with staff, do have constitutional, statutory, and contractual rights regarding speech. And that is something that the board and district staff are cognizant of, and still want to have this complicated conversation about.
I move to remove item A from the agenda and postpone it until a later meeting, a June meeting.
Cindy has moved that we remove the second reading for policy 5254, staff expression from tonight's meeting and postpone it to a later meeting. Tasha has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All right, this takes us into item B, second reading for policy 3131, district attendance area transfers.
Yes, and this is a second reading and we're recommending this policy for approval.
Actually, so board, before we vote and all that, we can have a discussion about this. It is the second reading. Did you have any questions or discussion about policy 3131?
Thank you for bringing this. At our previous board meeting, you went through this very diligently. And so we did see all the details. And so thank you for that work, because last year it was important for us all of a sudden to, not all of a sudden, but to, for the first time, have boundaries. And then to recognize that we needed clarity on that. So you did a lot of work of looking at what other districts have and bringing together a Ellensburg specific policy for us to consider tonight.
I guess I just have you, as superintendent, have you heard any pushback to any element of this policy? Has there been debate or challenge to, like, from parents or anyone else? I'm curious about what we're not hearing, if anything.
I have not heard anything from parents or from staff. Kelly, I'll defer that to you if you've heard anything, because since you work with Matt.
Yes, we went ahead and we created a process for in-district, because as we talked about before, we now have these 4 elementary boundaries. So we created a procedure and we've submitted this to you. We are currently in the process of doing this, where families have gone through the process. They filled out the application and it's been submitted according to this policy and the procedure that we've laid out. We're kind of following that since we don't have one. I have not had any complaints, but we haven't made final decisions yet. There's clearly appeal opportunities for people if they feel like they would like to have that voice. What's nice about it is it just brings clarity to, you know, what happens if you're a staff member? What happens if your student is performing, you know, a particular way? There's like 9 different areas to say, you know, here are reasons why we would or would not include that student. So it's really clear. So I don't expect there to be, but when you do, you know, finally go through the process, you could have people that, you know, might not be happy about it, but I don't see it really being much of an issue on that.
I just want to clarify. So last year when we did the attendance zones and we had the attendance zone committee and all that, we had something similar in place, but it was not policy, correct? Yep. And this is just solidifying, this is the policy, this is what we're going to go by.
Yep. And last year, people were pretty happy. We didn't have a lot of concerns around that as well. For in-district transfer, yeah.
All right, board, I would entertain a motion on policy 3131.
I'll move to approve policy 3131.
I second.
Cindy has moved that we pass policy 3131. Jonathan has seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, takes us on to item C, second reading for policy 3141, student services, non-resident students.
So board, again, this is a second reading for policy 3141, and we are recommending approval of this policy.
I second.
Tasha has moved that we adopt policy 3141. Jonathan has seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Takes us on to item D, second reading for policy 5001, hiring retired school employees.
Yep, this is a second reading of policy 5001, and we recommend approval of this policy. Again, this is a policy from WASDA.
I second.
Board, any discussion? All right, Tasha has moved that we adopt policy 5001. Jonathan has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, policy 5001 pass. That takes us to board reports. Tasha, do you have a ledger report?
The legislature has closed and I should have a robust ledge report. But instead, I'm going to talk about the unfortunate incident that happened today in our schools and to our community. And as I'm going to try to collect my thoughts, because I've not had a moment to try and write them down, but I've been sitting in this chair for a while. And so I've experienced lots of school shootings in our country. It seems especially unnerving that it happens during Teacher Appreciation Week and at the wrapping of legislative, and tonight when our elementary principals came to share achievement data about reading and math, because it's a constant reminder that our community has put a layer of expectation and danger on our staff and students that our hands are tied. This is not something that we can solve, the gun issue. This is not something that our administrators should be putting hours and months into planning. But since they have put in hours and months of planning and working collaboratively with our local police department, when a threat came in, they were within minutes of responding. And our students who are high school students who have been practicing this since that they were kindergartners, probably 3 times a year, knew exactly what to do and how to behave. And most of us parents with secondary students got text messages that all of a sudden this was not a drill, this was real. And the grim reality of we could be Uvalde, we could be any of the other chosen catastrophes that have happened to other communities was real for about 30 minutes. And our staff reacted phenomenally in a situation that should not be on them. And our students acted phenomenally, and parents picked up children on a Wednesday when it's a short day and heard lots of stories. And my 6th grader was astounded by the 8th grader who came bounding into his gym class and told all the 6th graders to sit next to their gym lockers and take off their shoes because they had a lineup of kids that were going to throw their gym shoes at the shooter, and they were going to do it in waves of 4, and they knew exactly what to do because that 8th grader was incredible and told them what to do. My 4th grader thought that her teacher was incredible because she pulled that class into a classroom and read out loud to them, even though Mazzy knew that she was nervous because her voice quavered every once in a while, and she thought she might be nervous. Once again, we have put our staff and students in the line of danger, and yet we sit here and ask about reading and math and graduation and prom and track and all the things that our students and staff should be caring about. And as a school board, we can do absolutely nothing about it. We cannot have a $1 million reduction and then say, well, we're going to harden our schools, which we know does not work because Uvalde and all the ones before us have tried it. And so now I sit here as a plea again to our community that with all of the vigorous participation that we give to our students, all the parents who go up in line and cheer up for those track students and those baseball players and those proms and graduations, could we please take it to our legislatures and say we need to solve the gun problem because this country and these students deserve it. And so I'm going to beg us to please do something about this.
Thank you, Tasha. For board chair report, the only thing I have is I just want to reiterate again to all the teachers and that we have from pre-K all the way up to our Senior year or 12th graders, thank you guys all so much for all that you do for the students. You really work so hard to give them the best educations that they deserve. And we're just really appreciative of all of you. So thank you. All right, so that will take us into public comment. Leslie, can you please get us set up for public comment? The board will allot up to 30 minutes as a total time allotted for public comment this evening, and each speaker will have up to 3 minutes of time. The board is not obligated to provide additional public comment time to accommodate everyone in attendance. The board is not obligated to respond to questions or challenges made during the public comment period, and the board's silence will not signal agreement or endorsement of any speaker's remarks. In my capacity as board president, I may terminate an individual's remarks when the allotted time has passed. I may also interrupt or terminate any speaker who is making uncivil comments. Uncivil comments include, but are not limited to, obscene comments, comments that are defamatory toward another person, or commentary that is unwarranted invasion of privacy. The board reserves the right to have anyone removed who refuses to adhere to the rules and creates a material and substantial disruption of the meeting. Personnel matters are generally private and administrative in nature. Constructive criticism can be helpful. At the same time, the board has confidence in its staff and programs and will act to protect them from unwarranted criticism or disruptive interference. Complaints or concerns received by the board or any board member will be referred to the superintendent and will not be considered or discussed by the board in this setting. I'd ask that you respect staff members' privacy and consider putting any concerns you have in writing if they pertain to a personnel matter. The board can then review and forward those to an appropriate administrator. Leslie, are we ready for public comment? Individuals in person wishing to be heard by the board need to be signed up to speak, and those on Zoom need to add their names to the document in the Zoom chat box. If you are unable to do this, individuals may also be recognized within Zoom by using the icon or emoji to show you are raising your hand for public comment. Once the board chair calls on an individual, they will identify themselves by stating their name and address for the record. Individuals will proceed to make comments within the 3-minute time limit. If an individual wants to request a response from the board, this may be possible by submitting the request in writing or email board@esd401.org. Leslie, we'll start with those in person first.
Kevin Dwight, 402 South Courts Mountain Drive here in Ellensburg, Washington. First things first, board, I just have to, I have a number of celebrations and a few thank yous for you. The reality of today is still sinking in with me, but we'll start with this first one. I just got word at 6 o'clock tonight that we got first place in Ellensburg High School sent a squad to the, bear with me, youth prevention squad, and they went to a competition. Ashley Callan, Kelly Dong, and Jasmine Rivera, guided by Tyler Douglas and Melissa Wynn at the high school, and they received first place in professionalism. So it's just, that was exciting news that came through later this evening. Very good. Thank you. In addition to that, I just wanted to champion some of our staff at the high school today. Not only did certified staff members, classified staff members, but also our administrators just did a tremendous job dealing with the incident that board member Woods described. And I'd also just like to thank you for that wonderful description and call out to the community for action around making change in our community. I think it's important that we share that vision moving forward. As outgoing Education Association president, I would like to thank you all, Superintendent Haber, as well as the board, for being willing to table policy 5254P for further discussion. I agree with the statements made in question the discussion, and I just want to thank you for your time and make sure that we're engaged in having that conversation and adding clarity to the discussion. I'm excited to get caught up on some of the things that were learned at WASDA and where that language might go and what we might use it for in terms of helping to make progress forward in improvements in helping staff and community members understand what that might look like. Don't know yet. So excited for that conversation. Beyond that, Superintendent Harborough, thank you for your time in the district. Looking forward to the summer. I know all of our staff have mentioned that they are emotionally tired. It's been a long year and they're having a hard time describing why. I think I have some ideas, but I think you probably do as well. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we'll give it just a minute and close public comment if nobody. So if you're on Zoom and you want to have public comment, make sure you raise your hand or use the emoji, but give it about a minute. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Takes us on to new business. Board, is there any new business?
I know the end of the school year has come with a lot of stuff, but do we have clarification on possible replacements of these two and one not here? Of our student board members?
I can't go.
I know. Can we keep you here?
I think that's probably something we need to discuss in like agenda setting and as a board, maybe you can, if you have some ideas around that, we can set a time with Haley. I know we talked about the process of having maybe juniors instead of seniors for next year so that we have two that go on, or maybe one senior and one junior. So, you know, we could look at that process. I thought I'd talk with Haley a little bit more about that and just kind of get her recommendation. But I know that was a recommendation that you guys had when we talked about it. So we've had that last time toward the end of the year. I think last year we had it in June. So we started that conversation. But if that sounds good to you guys, we can maybe do like one junior and one senior next year. And I can ask Haley to reach out like we've done in the past. Okay.
Ginger, I don't remember when we interviewed. You and I did the interviews with Haley, and was that like right at the beginning of the school year? Or was it at the end of?
It was at the end of the year last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, board, no new business. Let's see, executive session tonight?
No.
Okay. Board calendar. Just have a lot coming up. Any clarification or next steps? Signing of official documents tonight? Yes. Sweet. All right, that takes us to adjournment, board.
Second.
Asha moves that we adjourn. Cindy has seconded. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.